This is Tyler Lyle from the Midnight, and you are listening to Monsters, Madness, and Magic.
All right, folks, welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I'm your host, Justin, here with a quick word before we dive in. Now, in this episode, I chat with singer and songwriter Tyler Lyle about his childhood in the Deep South, shedding religion for philosophy, the birth of the Midnight, nostalgia as a double-edged sword, an upcoming graphic novel from the band, new music, and more. As always, thank you all for listening out there, and if you're listening on your podcasting platform of choice and you'd like to help the show grow, please leave us a review. And if you happen to be watching the video on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe because it does help. Anyway, without further ado, here you go. Okay, Tyler, take us back in time. You're a youngster. Are you a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all the above?
Mostly book reader. I would build a fort on occasion, but I would classify myself as a book reader. I grew up in a pretty small town, and there weren't a lot of avenues of escape. So my library was kind of the first one, and that's one that stuck with me.
What genre, or you have any authors that you lean towards, or genre?
Now it's way different. I went to school and studied philosophy, so I like psychology books. I like, the one thing that degree gave me was the ability to read dense material. But when I was a kid, I liked all sorts of weird stuff. I remember being in like fifth grade and reading a novelization of Saving Private Ryan and being like, nobody knows that I'm reading about, bodies being torn apart. I remember a teacher asking me if I was okay when I was reading Silence of the Lambs in like sixth grade. But yeah, books were that for me. All sorts of stuff. I try and read more fiction now. I feel like I've, all of the philosophy and the science and the self-help and all that stuff is really great, but I like the feel of being on an adventure,
You don't want to get too bogged down in reality.
Yeah, well, it's just too much head, and not enough the feeling of motion
Yeah.
that a good novel brings.
So whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in Western Georgia. The city's called Carrollton. And it's a small town. There's not a lot going on there. It's outside of the periphery of Atlanta, far enough that it has its own kind of regional, rural identity. But there's a town. It's got a hospital and a university and a little square in the middle. And I left when I was 18.
You're preaching to the choir, man. I live in Edgefield, South Carolina. I'm about 20 minutes outside of Augusta, like right near the Georgia border.
Yeah, man.
Sounds exactly like how I grew up, and I'm still here.
Right on, right on. Well, I moved back to Atlanta a couple years ago, so I'm back in my hometown most every week to pick up my 5-year-old when my parents watch him. So I'm not too far.
So speaking of your parents, were either of them musically or creatively inclined at all?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. So my dad he would play in the local like classic rock cover band, country cover band on Saturday night, and he was the music minister at a Methodist church on Sunday morning. So and this is like a rural Methodist church. So
Yeah.
I got the old hymns, and once a month we'd have like, the Black Gospel Church from across town come do a thing, or the bluegrass or the blue, like, I got the rural folk Americana thing naturally. But yeah, my dad is still a songwriter. He still owns a studio. My mom, after she retired, became a potter. So yeah, there's the creative gene runs in my family. My sister is a sculptor, and she makes very meticulous paper cutouts. So it runs in the family.
Oh, so your father worked in the church. Do you consider yourself religious?
No, no. I mean, I studied philosophy and kind of had a falling out with the religious upbringing that I had. But when I had a kid about 5 years ago, I had to figure out some kind of like, growing up in a religious community was nice. It left me with a lot of baggage that I had to unpack later in life. But we currently attend a Unitarian church on Sundays whenever we feel like it, because that's like the least religious amount of stuff that I feel like he'll have to unpack one day, while still feeling like there's some kind of religious education happening. But no, I'm not a believer in that sense anymore.
Right. There's a lot of negative that can come with it, but some churches have a great sense of community, you know.
Yeah,
That's good to grow up in.
yeah.
So, formative films and TV shows you grew up on, what comes to
Oh my.
mind?
Well, I wonder. So when I was in elementary school, like Candyman was happening, and the Friday the 13th sequels, and Nightmare on Elm Street, and so there was just this kind of need to like level up. Like it was tough. You were tough if you could watch those films, and somewhere between that and the religious trauma of actually like believing that the devil existed and like demons were, if I strayed too far off the path, that my soul was in actual danger. I think that created a double wake of like real fear in me as a young kid. Probably religious trauma that I'll still have to unpack, in my adult years. But gosh, the first film that I was like, yes, I love this, I want in, I want everything, was Terminator 2: Judgment Day. My uncle, he passed about a year ago, but he was the uncle that would. This was the time of VHS, so he would tape like Beavis and Butthead, Ren and Stimpy, South Park for me, and he would write Pokemon on it so that it would pass muster with my dad.
That's a great uncle.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Uncle Dave. Um, but yeah, Uncle Dave showed me Terminator 2. Probably the year that it came out. I was probably 6 years old or something. But yeah, that was a formative film. Obviously, all the Spielberg stuff, the Indiana Jones, that was huge for me. Back to the Future 2 was like my favorite film for years. Um, so yeah, things like that, things that have that wistful adventure feeling. Star Wars was huge in my house. So yeah, that was that for me.
Just sticking in the same vein there, what records were spinning around the house?
Aha, records were a little more interesting. So um, the stuff on pop radio in the 80s, the Tina Turners, the Huey Lewis, that was played. But more than that was the Garth Brooks, the Alan Jackson, the Brooks and Dunn. I didn't really know that there was a dial on the country radio station until I was probably 8 years old.
There's really not down here, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's either that or the gospel stations, right? Um, but yeah, that was my music education. The Eagles' greatest hits, and whatever my dad's classic rock cover band was playing. I wasn't really properly introduced to the Beatles and the Stones and Paul Simon and Bruce Springsteen, these artists that kind of mean so much to me now. I didn't really have an education in that until I was in high school.
So this is something I like to ask everyone, and you can take it whichever way you want. What scared you as a kid?
Ooh, I mean, to this day, I have trouble with a specific kind of horror movie, and it's like ghosts, but evil ghosts. Because in my childhood, I was afraid of evil ghosts, and I think that maybe my house was haunted. So that scared me as a kid. Um, yeah, that's and also growing up out in the rural areas where there's not the neighbors are pretty far away. So there's nobody around. It's just dead quiet. If anything slightly nefarious is going on, then like it's totally terrifying. So I freaked myself out a lot as a kid, and woke my parents up in the middle of the night. Which actually explains why I'm getting such hard payback from my 5-year-old these days with bad dreams and stuff.
It's funny, you know, just living in the South and in a rural area, your own imagination can work against you. I can just remember my grandpa telling me stories about the goat man that lived in the house in this woods that was near our property, and I would just stay awake at night looking out the window, waiting on the goat man to walk across the field, just terrified.
I feel like the South, because there aren't that many people to kind of check reality. Like in the cities, reality is kind of flattened. You need kind of a shared culture. That's how culture disseminates, is a little more flatly. But out in the rural areas where there's nobody to call grandpa on his BS,
His word is
things get
gospel. I know.
wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, the care actors, as my grandpa would call them, like just really unique, interesting people that like couldn't exist in an urban setting.
True, true. So, Tyler, when did you pick up your first instrument? How early on?
So my dad was always a musician. I was never interested in music. It was just him talking to his friends about bass cabs and stuff like that. And I was like, this is the lamest thing I can imagine. But my sister asked my dad, to show her some guitar chords when I was 13 or 14. And I was at the edge of the room and I learned four guitar chords and that was it. So the beginning of high school was really the beginning of music for me.
Did you immediately get bit by that bug of, wanting to create your own music or start a band or anything like that?
I've always been, and as I get older, I see myself as a bit more of a hermit. I really like composing the majority of the thing in by myself in the quiet. So I had a lane in the religious South to be able to be they call it the worship leader, and I did that for a few years. It just means you stand behind the microphone and sing and play guitar to the to the churchgoers on Sunday. But so I would do that, and it was very rarely with a band. I had very little experience with the band, honestly, until until the midnight started to happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
So would you say those days in church, that's when you sort of discovered your voice? And did you have that confidence initially, or was it a family member or friend that told you that you could, sing and perform?
You know, I wonder if I'd been in a different context, if it would have changed the outcome, because I think in a church setting, everyone's just happy that you're there. When they say you did a good job, they don't mean you did a good job. They mean you're a part of this community and we love you and we want to support you and we want to, lift you up. Um, so if I'd known how bad I actually was those first, 5 or 6 years, I probably would have put the guitar down. So I'm grateful for the old lady stretching the truth a little bit to kind of give me enough false confidence to push it a little farther.
I'm guessing this question will be church as well, but I like to ask, very first time on stage as a performer, and did it go off smoothly? Did your pants fall
Yeah.
down?
Yeah, I mean, did my no, I have quite a long list of horrible things that have happened from stage, but no, the first solo show that I ever played, it was a coffee shop in Carrollton, Georgia. It was called Gallery Row, and I played, I think, the week that I graduated high school. And it was just a solo gig. I played, probably covered some Dave Matthews songs and probably some terrible songs that I was writing at the time. But that was my first, performance as Tyler Lyle doing something other than the church thing.
Did you ever have to deal with or overcome stage fright or anything like that?
All the time. Yeah, the second midnight show that we did, that was 2017. That was in LA at the Globe Theater. We had a packed house of probably 1,300 people. It was sold out, and this is our second show. Our first show was terrifying, but it was like we have no idea what's going to happen. The second show was like, this is one of those moments in your life that if you really screw it up, you've really screwed something up. So I was downstairs trying my breathing exercises, trying to calm myself down. Yeah, that was terrifying, and not a particularly good show, I might add, but it was the one that changed our lives, and I kind of had a sense of that.
How is it now for you?
It's great. Moving up in room size, especially playing festivals, when there's a big jump in the amount of people, say from 1 to 2,000, that's safe, that's comfy. But when you jump up above 5,000, you're dealing with a sea of people instead of individuals in a big room. So that took a lot to kind of increase my energy and my sort of desire to fill up that space. But no, it's all fun now. I'm excited to jump up from there and see how that feels. It's not fun if it's not a little bit scary, you know. But
Right, agreed.
I feel comfortable in the spot that we're occupying right now.
So I've got to ask you about living in Prague as a kid coming from rural Georgia. Was that a culture shock?
Yeah, man. And this was before internet too. I was just in Asia for 2 months, and you can get around with translation on your cell phone. You're never lost because of GPS. But no, I moved to Prague to get certified to teach English in 2008. Um, I suppose the iPhone had been released, but I certainly didn't have one. So I moved to Prague with just an address and like a printed out map quest. And hoped that somebody would answer the door, and they did. After a while, it took a while, but yeah, that was a trip, man. I lived in Prague for a while, studied, drank a lot of Czech beer, and then I moved to Paris and taught English. It was the best. I would encourage anyone who is 22 years old and doesn't know what to do to get out of the county that they grew up in.
Were you still working on music at the time in the background?
I was writing a little bit just because it was something I did, but really my interest in performing more started in the American bars in Paris. I was playing open mics and featured sets at the Tennessee Bar, the Highlander, the Pop In, a few friendly English speaking bars in Paris would let me play. But yeah, that was a proper start. Yeah.
So what was the catalyst from there to move back to the States and eventually to LA, I think. That's how it went.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. Yeah, I moved back to Atlanta in 2000, early 2009. My visa had run out and my money was gone, and I'd pushed it about as far as I could. But the entire time I was living on, probably $200 or $300 a month, and I was, shopping at the discount meat store, and no, so I just didn't have the means really to fight my immigration status. So I came back to the U.S. to regroup. I made a record. It was my first EP called Notes from the Parade. And then I spent a good 2 years in Atlanta. I won the Eddie's Attic open mic shootout, which is a kind of it's where Jennifer Nettles and John Mayer and Sean Mullins, those guys kind of came out of. So that was a folk scene. That was my kind of community in Atlanta. But I broke up with a girl, and I just signed a deal in Los Angeles. So I thought, well, I guess I'm moving to LA for a while. And so that was 2011. I moved into John and Christy McVie from Fleetwood Mac's old house in Laurel Canyon.
Wow.
It was totally haunted. Saw the ghost there, heard him, pacing outside of my door. It was a total trip. But apparently, and this is rumor, but landslide was written apparently in the front yard because it was on a terraced hill and pebbles just constantly fell down. So I tried to write a lot of songs out on that porch where it was rumored. God, rumored. I think I'm subconsciously referencing the album that song is on. Anyway, yes. So I moved to LA. I spent a year or two trying to quote unquote make it in the industry, which just means taking your guitar around to offices, and they either do the up or down, thumbs up or thumbs down, and finally somebody gave me the thumbs up, and that was the person that introduced me to Tim McEwen in April of 2012.
Well, before we move on, we got to talk about this ghost situation.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about the ghost.
Outside of that, have you ever had a supernatural or paranormal experience you can point towards?
I don't think so. I've had weird visions. I've looked up into the sky and seen what looked like a weather vane, but so I'm more of the I can't remember if it's Henry or William James. I think it's William James. Reality and consciousness co-create each other. So I'm willing to admit that I don't know everything. I believe in the causal completeness of the physical, but I also believe that there's like a little remainder that we shouldn't put too fine a point on. So no, this was I lived in the house. I would have experiences all the time. My roommate would ask, "Were you up at 5 a.m. sweeping the kitchen?" I'd be like, "No, definitely not." And I would hear pacing, and I would wake up in the middle of the night when things were calling my name. It was totally bizarre. Actually, that was my first kind of experience in LA. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would go drive through the Hollywood Hills. And I think a lot of the inspiration for the early Midnight songs kind of came in that season. But I moved out of that house a few months after I moved in, probably 6 months. And then I came back for a party, went in to get a beer from the kitchen, and saw what looked like a figure from Halo 2 in active camo
Oh no.
in the kitchen. And I turned around and walked away and was like, all right, that's the last time I'm coming back to this house.
Well, you hope it's a ghost and not the arbiter.
That's right.
Do you think moving, the reasoning for moving out, were you getting freaked out or were you just moving on?
No, it was I was taking the room of a screenwriter who was working in the UK for that summer. So it was a set amount of time, and I covered a little bit of his rent. So I moved
Ah,
from Laurel Canyon to the beach, which I liked a lot more. Less ghosts anyway.
yeah. Take us through how the Midnight formed initially, how you guys
Sure.
all meet.
Yeah, so LA's weird. LA and Nashville, there are a lot of songwriters there. You don't know that on any given weekday there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people trying to quote unquote write a hit. So if you are represented by a publishing company or a label or a publishers' rights organization, there are people that will put you on blind dates with other musicians. So I came in as a writer primarily, artist secondarily, and that meant that I would generally be put in rooms with producers, and that's what Tim was. I remember showing up to the studio on Blakely in North Hollywood, and Tim was still living in Denmark at the time. He'd been in back and forth to America to do a few meetings and things, but we moved forward, and that was kind of it. I was coming from the Americana country narrative based songwriting, and he was coming from pop electronic world, and we had very little kind of creatively in common. But he put on a loop that he was writing in real time and said, "I'm going to go get some fresh air." And I wrote a verse, and he came back and he was like, "It's a great verse. What about the chorus? What about the B part?" And I was like, "Well, you only gave me the loop that was long enough for the verse." And he's like, "No, no, no, just use the loop and write the chorus over that too." And I was like, I'm coming from, country,
Yeah.
acoustic guitar world, and I'm like, "I don't think you can do that, but I'll try." And I did, and I cracked the code, and I thought, oh, this is a new way of writing. I'm going to write visual experiences, and it's going to be different. It's not going to be, I was writing with the Dixie Chicks at the time, it's not going to be that. It's going to be something different. um, so Tim enjoyed kind of the otherness that I brought to it, and I enjoyed the otherness that Tim brought to it, and somewhere in the middle, we just decided that we liked working with each other. So we made another date when he was back in the country, and we wrote Gloria, and we wrote Days of Thunder, and I think the last one that we did together was Los Angeles before we put out the Days of Thunder EP in 2014. So
Great songs.
thank you, man. It was just throwing stuff against the wall. Everything was free. We didn't know what the midnight was. We didn't have that name, when we were writing the songs. It was just free expression and seeing where we could meet in the middle.
Just the Midnight is a special band in the sense that you guys pluck almost every emotional string in your music. Can you speak a bit about the motto of the band and how nothing lasts forever?
Yeah, thank you. Mono no aware. I was just in Japan for the first time, so I was a total fraud for stealing that slogan 10 years ago or whenever it was. Um, Thinking about nostalgia as the premise for the band, that feeling of, I don't know, you go to your childhood home after having been gone for years. Like there's something different in the room. There's like a remainder there that you can't quite put your finger on. And I think that you know, time moving on, the distance between A and B, like who am I now at 38 years old that going back to 23, what is that feeling? And it just turned out that there was enough material to write from that mindset, from that place, from that kind of interrogation, that we've been able to string together a career off of it. And that's still the question, how do you move forward after a loss? Where do you belong? How much can you give of yourself before you've given too much? These are all kind of questions of the heart and questions of self-becoming. And it's been really fun to kind of be able to ask those questions on purpose in this
Right.
kind of format.
And not to get too deep, but the midnight makes me personally reflect, and not in a negative sense, but it makes me think of death.
Hmm.
And considering your philosophy degree and such, in the passage of time and all, is that something that you think about a lot? Is that like hidden in the Midnight's themes at all?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. An early reviewer for a folk show said all of his songs are either about sex or death. I think the thing that unites us as humans is that we will all die, and that our time on life is a finite amount. We don't know how long it is, probably most of us, but um, yeah, death makes things meaningful because it means that they're temporary, and we can get stuck on concepts and theories and I especially feel the presence of getting stuck in the wrong story with the election year coming, stuff like that. Like people just project themselves so quickly into the wrong story, but the inevitability, the guarantee of death should shake us out of that. Should make us kind to each other. Should kind of eat away the fat of our lives so that we can kind of get into what we actually want to be doing, moment to moment, day to day. And that's, generally spending time with the people we love, seeing new things, making the most of our time and making it count. But yeah, the existentialists and the Stoics think a lot about death, and I've read a lot of both of those groups of philosophers.
Yeah, I have to really be careful when I listen to the Midnight, to be honest with you. I have to make sure that personally, that I'm in the right state of mind.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Tell me more about that. I'm
Because
curious.
if I listen to Gloria and I'm having a bit of a bad day, it it makes me think a little bit too much of death. You know what I'm saying? And I kind of get
Mm,
stuck in my own head. And am I really doing everything that I want to do? And I'm just like, man,
yeah.
I gotta get my shit together or listen to something else. You know?
Oh, that's so interesting. I,
Yeah,
I like hearing that. I mean, um, it is an affecting kind of music. I can say that because Tim makes all the sounds, but it does have kind of a heavy. You're always riding the edge of, well, regrets, right? Like, do you regret the time that's passed? Did you do as much as you could have? And nobody ever does, right?
right. That's what it
You're
is.
not
Yeah.
you're not the same brain that's looking back, that was actually living the life and living the story. Um, that's so interesting. Thank you for telling me that. That's um, I kind of get it.
Yeah, yeah. 99% of the time, I'm enjoying listening to the Midnight, so I don't want you to think, it's bad. So, when did you realize personally that the band was gaining some traction?
Um, there was a Reddit outrun, had a post up. It was like the biggest post of the day, and it just meant that on Bandcamp, our EP that we'd put out a year before got a lot of views and downloads in a day. And we thought, well, okay, maybe this thing actually does have legs, and maybe we should uh, carry on with it. And that was when we decided to put out Endless Summer, which was what actually kind of changed our relationship with it. After that came Nocturnal, and we put out we played our first show, right around that time. So, but yeah, the internet, Reddit, we owe a lot to. It gives and it takes away.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was always that the fans of the music kind of demanded more, and we were happy that we'd both put 10 to 15 years each into our careers, and knew how special that was, rather than just trying to cram something down the throats of people who don't want to listen. When people connect with something, you don't ask too many questions. You just
Right.
try and honor that with your creativity and your labor.
So those feelings we were just talking about that the Midnight can summon up, do you feel those things when you're making the music?
Sure.
You
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's I got into tarot just before the pandemic, and there's this one card. It's the Judgment card, but in some decks it's the Time card, and it's like the slipstream, the difference between A and B, or the 20 years ago that you were in this room doing this thing, and now you're back, and how do you feel that you're in the old room? That card has always I've always written around that card as a musician, all the way back to my first EP in like 2008, 2009. So yeah, I feel it. I am that dude. I am isolated. I am lonely. I am a hermit. I'm trying to connect. I, have dreams of us melting together like the North Shore wave, and yet here I am, this individual who is, not supposed to be sentimental, who is not supposed to be, I don't know. I just feel like I'm as an individual, I'm an outlier in this culture of music that is successful or whatever. Um, and I feel like I'm just trying to like learn how to be a human.
Mm,
And somewhere in that, I feel the freedom to kind of be the oddball and to kind of write from an outsider's perspective about regrets and about um, I don't know, love lost, and how we move forward.
right. Are you still working on solo stuff now? Are you?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a 40 track record that I'm going to try and release next year.
Wow.
The first part of it, the first 11 songs, I put on Spotify sometime last year. But I have a studio in my house now, so I'm writing every day. So yes, the solo stuff continues. The stuff with Tim continues. I was just on the phone with him yesterday. We're gonna try and get a little demo club going. So
Wow.
yeah, always writing.
So, man, tell us about this graphic novel, if whatever you can share about it. Are you personally writing it? How's that going?
Yeah. So well, I'm not a comic book writer, but I've read a ton of Joseph Campbell. I know a lot about the hero's journey. I've seen Star Wars at least 100 times. Um, there's only so much you can do. You can kind of hang nice ornaments on a tree. That's what a song kind of is. It's a 3.5 minute to 7 minute long statement, but it's not a hero's journey. You can't follow him from from chapter 1 to chapter 10.
Right.
And uh, the opportunity fell into our laps. Our manager said, "Hey, by the way, if you guys would ever want to make a graphic novel, we actually have a couple connections." And I said, "Yes, I would love to make a graphic novel. Let me get you in contact with my dear friend Zach Kaplan, who is the person who wrote this with us." So he's the one responsible for the script of the thing. Obviously, it takes a village. But in the pandemic, we were having lots of long conversations about, mourning the past selves that you have to move on from so that you can become your current self. How do you overcome being kind of trapped in middle age, still feeling like you're 20 years old and want to take over the world, but you have these responsibilities. In what ways is nostalgia a crutch that keeps us from living our miraculous but mundane existence, and in what ways does it help encourage us? What ways does it lead us to the trailhead of myth, where we can kind of find the right story to live? How does the shadow work? The Jungian concept of the shadow is something that I've spent a lot of time with. So all of these things, it's basically I get to rapid fire that to Zach, and
Mm.
he's like, okay, let me go work, and he'll come back with something, and we'll say, yes, this works, but this doesn't work. And it's been a few years of us shaping the conversation. But no, we're so glad that we have professionals working on it, and doing the things that the professionals should do. We love our fans, and we don't want to cobble something together that doesn't feel excellent in every way. So, but yes, Tim and I were a big part of the inception. We were part of the whole process of creation, and obviously we'll be doing a lot of PR and a lot of selling graphic novels out of the back of our hatchback when it comes out. But no, we have Janoy Lindsay, the Tiago Roca, just some amazing people working on it. The artists, the colorists, and the people at Dark Horse who
Oh,
are,
wow. I didn't know it was Dark Horse.
yeah, Dark Horse is putting it out. We're stoked.
Oh, yeah, that's guaranteed quality. Plans to maybe release a soundtrack with it or music specific for the graphic novel? Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. So we're figuring out our next label moves this week. Over the next month, the music portion of it will become a little clearer. But yes, short answer is that there were songs written in light of the story arc of the Midnight Shadows graphic novel, and they're more like cousins than they are twins, if that makes sense. But yes, for sure, we have some new music coming out this year. I don't know if we'll make the full record this year, but um, the songs are written mostly, we think.
Do you ever have the itch creatively, just as a creative, to write short stories or anything like that yourself?
It's so funny. Yes. So when I came out with my solo record in 2015, The Native Genius of Desert Plants, I put together a desert companion book, which was like 120 pages or something of me musing about the oldest trees in the world and kind of telling my story of how the songs came to be. And it was such a positive experience. I think with the 40 track record that I'll come out with next year, I hope to include a book of at least 120 pages, and I'll probably be writing that this afternoon after we get off the phone. So yes, I love writing prose and I love literature. I find myself as a jack of all trades, hack of all trades. I joke.
I like that.
I'm not that great at any one thing, but I'm just ravenously curious to dip my toes in a lot of water. So I would love to write something a little more long form, especially in the world of the midnight. That sounds super fun.
It does. And I think there's a lot of people out there that would disagree that you're not great at something. What's the best music related advice that you've been given and who gave it to you?
Okay. It's rare that I immediately have an answer to this question. I was writing with a guy named Troy right before I moved to LA in 2011. And we were walking back from lunch, about to finish a song that never, I don't even know what happened to that song, but he was like, the Potts story. And I was like, what Potts story? He's like, you don't know about the Potts? Anyway, I'm gonna tell you the Potts story. And nobody else has ever told me the Potts story, so he acted incredulous that I'd never heard the Potts story. The Potts story is roughly that there are two groups in a scientific study to see who can make the most clay pots. The first group is told, make the best pots that you can. Don't worry about the time, just make them awesome. We need 10 out of 10 clay pots. The second group, they said, we don't care if they're good, just make a ton of pots. Make as many pots as you can. And the moral of the story, basically, at the end of the day, the people who are trying to make the best pots, were making pots at a 7 or 8 out of 10. They were good, but they weren't awesome. But the other group made, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pots. And, by the third or fourth batch of the hundreds, they were like far and away better than the initial group who was trying to make the best. So my relationship to creativity is just throw stuff against the wall. Don't get too precious about it. And don't employ the editor too early in the process, because he will come and make big cuts perhaps before the thing is really formed. So
I like that.
make pots. That's my one advice. It's the one that's stayed true over the years.
I'm going to have to implement that myself because I am a bit too, I have an editor on my shoulder because I do write short stories and stuff. So if I write a paragraph, I'm already wanting to change up words and write a whole new paragraph out of that paragraph. It's just something I have to.
It's like prose writing is different than songwriting though, because you can write, 10,000 words and not have a single line of that song. But in prose, you can chop the heck out of that, and you're still starting with something. It's like I can use these sentences. I'm going to delete this, but at least there's a building block. But yeah. I think don't invite the editor in until the first draft is done, for sure. That's advice I need for myself as well.
Well said. So, out of all the songs, projects, bands, whatever, anything you've ever worked on or been a part of, which project would you consider the most challenging? Is there one that you lost sleep over?
Ooh. It's interesting because I view records as kind of funerals for friends. It's like we wrote the songs, we loved the songs, we thought about them really hard, and now they need to go on out. And once they're out into the world, you just have zero control over them. And it's always Tim, I think, struggles with the letting go of the thing. It's not over. He would edit a song and forever. Like there have to be deadlines so that he just is done. It's finished when the deadline hits, and then it's out the door. So he struggles with that, and I suppose it's always going to be a struggle for me to um, let go of my need for people to hear what I wanted to hear out of it, and allow them to have their own relationship with the symbols and the images, and they will create their own story and their own meaning from it. It's really, that's the miracle of music, but it's also the challenge that you have no direct line to know if what you're doing is any good or is useful, or
Right.
if people are going to connect to it at all. So yeah, Heroes, I felt when we put Heroes out, I guess a year and a half ago, I had so many creative babies in that one, and the reception was good, but it was like we missed the old Midnight, to which I'm like, but it's me, it's my voice, it's my lyrics, and it's on Tim's music. Nothing's changed fundamentally, um, but the songs aren't yours anymore. You've given them away to the world, and so it's somebody else's opinion that's absolutely as valid as your own. So that's the hardest part, is kind of letting the world, have the babies that it gave to you for a minute.
Yeah, exactly. What's the what would you say is the most impactful live show you've seen as a fan?
Ooh, wow. Gosh, I'm tempted to say something like the White Stripes, because that was an amazing show. But honestly, I saw a band called Woven Hand at the Drunken Unicorn in probably 2009, and it's kind of like gothic folk music, but he's this strange religious dude, and there was just an energy, just a weird vibe. I've never seen U2. I guess I've seen Coldplay. It was fine, but that like kind of like big, you know, big rock band energy. I love that. I vibe off of that. But there's something interior about being in a 100-person club, and the songs just feel like a secret, and it feels
Yeah.
like you're in on something that's like kind of forbidden a little bit, like that nobody else outside had like knows how special this thing is going on in here. So that'll be my final answer on that one. Woven Hand at the Drunken Unicorn in Atlanta in 2009.
Do you have a preference as a performer when it comes to, more intimate small bar gigs or festivals?
Yeah. If I'm playing solo acoustic, which I still do, I like the intimacy of the 200-person or under venue, because I can look at everybody. I feel like I'm telling my story. I feel like we're having a moment, that I am the troubadour singer songwriter, and this is the appropriate venue for this. But for the midnight, the bigger's usually better. There are a few rock clubs that are in the 700 to 800 cap, that you can just take out your in-ear monitors, and you can hear the room, and you can just dig in with your guitar and get a little more distorted and get a little looser. But on the whole, I would say no. The bigger the PA, the bigger the lights. If you've got lasers and confetti, and like, we are there to uplift. um, Emil Durkheim has this term, collective effervescence. We are here to kind of lose our ego into this collective happening that is going on just above our heads. So for the midnight, that's where I want to spend the majority of the time, is with the Holy Mother of the Midnight, somewhere not on stage and somewhere not in the crowd, but just this joint kind of woohoo moment that takes everybody out of their week for a second.
I like that a lot. Tyler, seen any good movies lately?
No, actually, no, that's not true. I was in Asia for 2 months, so I spent a week in Tasmania by myself after the Australian tour was over, and I saw Dune 2. And man, what a satisfying movie that was. It just brought all of those feelings of like watching, the early Star Wars movies back. That even more than that, reading Dune in those moments where the sword fights are written just so well, you're in it, you're like, you have stake in it, like your heart is pounding and you're reading. I don't feel like a movie has captured those feelings for me um, like Dune 2 has. So
It's a
I
throwback,
loved it.
yeah.
Did you watch it? Did you like it?
Yeah, I've seen Dune 2. Yeah, it's great. I was worried after the first movie. Not that the first movie was bad, but it's like, okay, it's pretty good. But
Yeah.
the second one took it to another level.
The first one now it seems like a prelude. It seems like all the background that information they needed to give you to
Yeah,
be able to kind of go nuts.
yeah.
Yeah,
It was worth
I
it.
it was worth it. And I don't I'm on the fence as to whether he should make another one. I was like, I don't know if you can top it because you just brought everything, to the grand finale and it was awesome.
That's the kicker, isn't it? So you release a great album or you write a great movie, and I was like, okay, go do it again.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, Tyler, just to put a bow on this thing here, what's on the horizon for you? What can you share without getting in trouble?
I get in trouble all the time. We are going to Europe. We've got some dates on continental Europe, and then in the UK. I think there are two or three festivals that we're playing out there. We're going on tour with Chromeo this fall, which should be awesome. Playing good bigger rooms with them, and we're excited to be on our first co-headline tour. And then we'll come out with the graphic novel in fall, and probably do something similar again next year. But we're working on new music, and hopefully by this summer, at least the first single will be out.
Hell yeah, man. My wife and I are huge fans, yet to have make it to a midnight show, but next time you guys are touring Southern US, we'll be there, guaranteed.
Love it. We got a few shows in Georgia and North Carolina, so if we're close enough, you please make it out.
We'll
We'll
be
have a
there,
drink
guaranteed.
backstage.
We will.
Justin, thank you very much. It was great to talk with you, man. And seriously, come out to a show. I would love to drink some whiskey with you after the show, or like just hang out and pick your brain.